Welcome back. I'm Richard Hasnote, and I'm your host for the Wisdom Inspired Life podcast, with listeners in over 70 countries and the Wisdom Inspired Life YouTube channel. Thank you for coming back. In these, I've been doing 3 episodes, and this is the 3rd in the series. It's part of the bigger Words of Wisdom series, where I share wisdom from great teachers that have influenced me in my life. They may or may not be inspirational for you. Of course. In this particular series, I'm sharing various dimensions of my relationship with Sogyal Rinpoche, who is well known for the international bestseller, The Tibetan Book of Living and Dying. And in the course of my life, he's played a very important role as an important teacher in my life. By his own admission, he's not an enlightened, God-realized being like the Dalai Lama is, and as a result has some human frailties that were troublesome certainly in the latter part of his life before he passed a few years ago. So with that as an introduction, let me move into a bit of a personal talk of the impact that he's had on my life. Before Sogyal Rinpoche came into my life, I had made a certain amount of progress along my spiritual journey, and I've shared some of this in earlier episodes. The most important part of that event was my experiencing the book Living with Joy by Senea Roman. That proved to be a major inspiration early on in my spiritual journey, and remained a focus for an extended period of time, because there was a lot that I was inspired by in that book, and there's a lot that I wanted to manifest in my life. And bringing about change of the magnitude that Living with Joy required me to do compared to where I was before, which is essentially a non-spiritual person, did require a significant amount of focus. I had begun a meditation practice. It was a beginning meditation practice. I was probably spending 15, maybe 20 minutes a day. Every day I was dedicated to it and felt that I was making some significant progress. This was also a period of time where I was also exploring quantum physics, and I've talked about this in an earlier series of episodes also, and it's where I found that I was trying to ground my spiritual journey somewhat in science, since I was a person of Western science in many ways, and where I found that some of the key insights of quantum physics and wisdom and spirituality came together on some dimensions, but with quantum physics, particularly the understanding of reality, and that in reality there was really nothing solid. This thing that we call reality is, as you may discover, and not the subject of today's episode, but it's really a dream that we need to end up waking up from as we progress through higher states of consciousness. Okay? So, let me move that aside. So that's kind of where I was. I was living on the East Coast, I think, at the time, and I had gone to a place called Esalen, which is down south of Big Sur in California. I'll talk more about that in a second. For several times for personal growth teachings by very leading folks in a variety of fields, and had found a variety of benefits from that. But the common thing throughout all of that up until this period of time was Esalen. As I said, it's south of Big Sur, just a little bit. It's right on the Pacific coast. It is a tremendously beautiful place to be. Their meals are the best vegetarian meals that I've ever eaten anywhere, and I'm a pescatarian which is a vegetarian who eats seafood. Just wonderful, wonderful food. quaint little cabins that you would stay in with one or two other people occasionally, and meeting rooms that for the most part were small. And then you had the main building that was up overlooking the Pacific Ocean, beautiful, beautiful. And then you could walk down the hill to two things, where they had their massage facility, which was a world-class European-based massage capability, and natural hot springs just a little bit lower than that, right in front of where the waves were crashing on the ocean, on the shore. And you could be in the hot tub looking at the waves coming in and crashing right just a few feet in front of you. Wow. A wonderful, wonderful experience. So, wanted to go back there, no surprise. And so I said, okay, I can be there on this particular weekend. What are they teaching? And looking through their course guide, I found that there was this course on meditation and healing, both of which I was interested in. I've talked about in an earlier episode my experience with healing, which was in progress at that time. My experiences hadn't completed themselves by then, but I certainly had an interest in healing, and I certainly had an interest in meditation. And I said, wow, that's for me. And then I looked at the name of the person that was teaching it, and I went, wow, I've never seen a name like that. Sogyal? What's that? Rinpoche. What is Rinpoche? What kind of last name is that? Well, so I said, okay, I'll go. So I went to my first meditation and healing teachings with Sogyal Rinpoche, and we started on a Friday night, and we're sitting there waiting for him, and he walks in, and I knew he by then was Buddhist, and I didn't know what Buddhists look like and all that sort of stuff, and he walked in very informally dressed and nothing special, and came in and kind of sat down and started having a conversation with us. And I was just struck by initially his simplicity, his sincerity, no pomp and circumstance or anything like that, even though he was just below the Dalai Lama in terms of his stature within Tibetan Buddhism. So, and at this time, Sogyal Rinpoche was not that well known, because in our particular class were about 10 or 12 people, very small class, and we went through with the teachings with him. And I found the teaching enriching and valuable to a certain extent, but the primary thing that I came away from that first experience, and for the next 3 years in a row, I came back for the same teaching, meditation and healing, Friday, Saturday, Sunday teaching at Esalen, and I just loved being in his presence. And I was struck by a number of things. One, I was just struck by his deep wisdom. It just being in his presence, it was different than any other human being I'd ever been in the room with, or even heard about, quite frankly. Very impressed, just at a deep inner level. My intuitive level said, wow, I'm really supposed to be here with this person right now. And the second thing that may surprise you, it certainly surprised me, and that was that he had a great sense of humor and lightness about him, not taking himself seriously in the traditional sense. He could smile and could crack a joke, and his smile would just kind of light up the room. And through the 4 years that I went through with this course with him, I just was, being in his presence was absolutely amazing. And in year 3 or 4 of that, of those teachings, one of the students in this very small class asked Sogyal Rinpoche if he would give us a blessing. And I didn't know what that meant. How do you bless somebody? And we were sitting in a semicircle in front of him. And so he agreed, and he closed his eyes, and so we closed our eyes and said nothing, and I guess was going to provide us with a blessing, and I didn't quite know what that meant. And then I opened my eyes just to get a glimpse of what was going on. And what I saw was concentric circles of energy being emanated from him at the center out to all of us in the room. And I shook my head, I rubbed my eyes, I closed my eyes, I reopened them again. I couldn't be seeing this, I told myself. And even after I did that, continued to see the concentric circles of energy, the blessing. I could see the visual energy of the blessing that he was sending us. And closed my eyes and then bathed myself in the blessing that he had. And it was one of the most peaceful, deep experiences that I've had along my journey. Didn't quite know how to explain all of that. And in my last year, something more special happened that I partially understand. At a lunchtime break, I went up and was going to ask him a question, and another student was there asking him a question, and he just asked me to be patient, and I was as patient as I could be back then. I wasn't a very patient person, so I waited for him. And we were in this little house, and there was a big lawn that went down to overlook the Pacific Ocean from where we were. And Sogyal Rinpoche was about 5 feet 4 inches tall. I'm 6 feet 5 inches tall. And so we stepped off the deck and went out onto the lawn, at which time we're walking side by side, and he reaches over and takes both my hands in his hands. And it was a unusual position. My hands were being held by him as we walked side by side, and he talked to me. And to this day, I don't really remember what we talked about. What I did remember was the energy that I was experiencing coming from him as he held my hands as we walked very slowly across this big lawn to the edge. And when we got to the edge, still holding my hands, he turned and looked me in the eye and kind of, again, don't remember the words, but wished me well and had a big smile on his face and let go of my hands. And I just stood there, and he turned and slowly walked away. And I was at peace, felt wonderful, paused. The Pacific Ocean never looked better. And after that, a little bit, I started and I walked back through the vegetable garden and flower garden that's at Esalen. And I just stood there and looked, and the flowers had never seemed more beautiful. Vegetables had never seemed more majestic and wonderful and nutritious. And it was a wonderful sensory experience. And from there, I continued on my day, and I've looked back on that experience, and clearly there was a transmission of some sort of energy from him to me. I could feel it. And I have never fully understood the importance of it, but it was a highly unusual event, as best I can tell from others that I've had conversations with. I think it made a major change and lift in my spiritual journey. And at the end of that experience, I said to myself that Sogyal Rinpoche had really taught me what a human could be. He was inspirational, and I said to myself, if a human being can be that wise and that joyous and that compassionate and all of that, then I want to be that. I knew I was probably 1,000,000 miles behind him on that journey, but I was going to begin that journey. And I did begin that journey, and it continues for me, and I've still got a long, 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 long way to go. Got it. But that experience was just marvelous. And I get down on my knees every morning and I give thanks, saying to him, thank you for coming into my life and touching my life and letting me know what a human can be. I thank him every day for what he taught me, because it's been crucial to my ability to progress to whatever degree I've been able to do. So I'm just talking about him and sharing this with you is a wonderful experience for me. So subsequent to that, I went to one other teaching that he had a few years later, and he went from having 10 or 12 people, a very small group, and sitting on beanbag pillows in front of him, to hundreds of people in a room. His popularity exploded really around the world before his passing. Well, wanted to share with you that experience, an important part of my spiritual journey. Hopefully it's been of some interest and maybe even help for you. Well, there you have it. That concludes my 3-episode series on Sogyal Rinpoche, with the first episode sharing with you a brief essence, his description of Buddhism in a very brief talk that he gave in France. Second, a far more helpful, certainly to me, and I think to many of you, understanding of the mind and how to manage the mind, and especially if you're into meditation, critically important understandings that come from all of that. And then I've just shared with you my personal story of experience with Sogyal Rinpoche. Well, if you want to learn more about what's going on in my Wisdom Inspired Life, you can go to mywisdominspiredlife.com. You can listen to the podcast there. Of course, you can listen to it on Apple and Podcasts and Spotify and Google Play and all those sort of things there. It tends to be a further advanced wisdom teachings that come right now, deep insights into the Christian Bible and the Bhagavad Gita, from 2 books by Paramahansa Yogananda. A lot of good stuff there. Well, as you've figured out by now, I'm on a journey, and I appreciate you being with me on this journey today. And I look forward to continuing this journey with you.